Hello, everyone. My name is Joanne, and I'm one of the community admins in the maintenance community by Upkeep. Thank you all for joining us today. If you aren't already a member of the maintenance community Slack group, we'd love to have you join us. I'll go ahead and add the link in the sign up chat on the right side. Today we have Andy Gager joining us for a presentation on the true cost of MRO inventory. I'll let Andy introduce himself in a moment, but I know we're in for a great presentation today. And again, the recording from today's session is going to be available in our Slack group tomorrow, along with a copy of the slides that you see here today. Andy is also available to answer questions live in the Slack group, but feel free to share the recording with anyone that you believe may benefit from hearing Andy's expertise. Final piece of housekeeping before we get started, you'll notice that your cameras and microphones are not turned on. So what you want to do is, if you want to ask or answer any questions for Andy, you'll use the chat feature right on the right side here. We'll leave some time at the end of the session for any Q&A, but any questions we don't get to, we'll go ahead and answer offline in the Slack group as well. So that's all from me. I'll go ahead and hand it off to Andy to get us started.
Oh, great. Thank you, Joanne. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm looking forward to this session. I hope, my hope is that you'll get some value out of it. And my other hope is that you'll get a chance to at least chuckle, because even though MRO is pretty serious, I think everybody around the world faces some of the same issues that each of you are experiencing as well. So let's get right into it. Very briefly, this is a little bit of my background. In private industry, I was a global distribution warehousing manager. I was a director of global sourcing and materials. I was a plant manager for a number of years. I have a whole lot of C's after my name, which means I just spent a lot of money on getting those C's. On the bottom there, I listed, just a sampling of some of the organizations that I've worked with around the world. There's steel, there's aluminum, there's oil and gas, there's food and beverage, there's pharmaceutical, there's a wide range of organizations that I've listed there. Excuse me, but one of the reasons that I put it up there is there is no difference in any of those organizations. Of course, their product or their service is different, okay, but every one of those organizations have assets, and every one of those assets need to be maintained. And we could have the best operators in the world, the most qualified maintenance technicians in the world, the best planners, maintenance planners, job plans. But if we can't get you the materials, all else just sort of, we struggle. So, in order for us to be clicking on all cylinders, we need to be in this all together: operations, maintenance, supply chain, engineering, and so forth. So with my experience in the materials management world, I see that, a lot of organizations are struggling with it. Okay, and I'll explain that a little bit when I talk about when we get into current state. So today, this is what we're going to talk about. The current state, at least, how I see things, again, all around the world. Really understanding the true cost of inventory. Not a lot of people, a lot of organizations consider it a cost center. I'm in a different camp. I truly believe that you can make the MRO storeroom or materials warehouse a profit center by having the right parts at the right time, in the right quantity, to the right specifications. From there, then we're going to go into, look, this is just a big elephant, and how are we going to eat that elephant? So, how do we get control? So I'm going to walk us through a couple steps, a number of steps on how we can get our arms wrapped around the storeroom or the warehouse. I'm going to show you and share with you a couple things that I do personally when I come into organizations and I do a storeroom assessment. I'm going to share with you some of the things that I look at. And a lot of that is based on my history and my personal history, because I certainly was audited enough times in my career, where the accountants come in, they do their, year-end reconciliations, they do their random checks on our inventory and so forth. I'll get into that a little bit later on. And then I don't want to diminish the importance of how important it is for planning to be involved here. So the whole planning and scheduling process, and how the planning group works very closely with the storeroom operation. So that's how we'll end it up. Okay. So see if this sounds a little bit familiar, because it certainly was in my world, more than one occasion. Friday afternoon, 4:58, 4:59 in the afternoon, our most critical piece of equipment goes down. We're behind schedule. All right. Our maintenance technicians, the bat phone rings. They rush in. They try repairing the equipment until they get the part. Somebody goes to the storeroom. We don't have the spare part, so they do the repair job with a bunch of duct tape and baling wire. They contact procurement, who gets on the phone, calls up the supplier, orders the part, and we need it overnight. One of the issues, and again, this has happened to me once or twice, we bring in a crew on overtime on Saturday because we're expecting that part to show up on the FedEx or UPS or DHL delivery truck Saturday morning. Everybody's anxiously waiting on the receiving dock. Here comes our friend from FedEx or UPS or DHL. They back it up. They open up the door. They throw one or two boxes on the dock, and no part. At least not the part we're waiting for, right? Because when we ordered the part, nobody checked that little box that said Saturday delivery. Just because we say overnight does not necessarily mean Saturday delivery. Overnight sometimes refers to next business day. So now all of a sudden I got a whole bunch of people standing around with no part. So now that repair can't be done until Monday, which then shuts down production until we can get that equipment, back up and running again. So, I hope that sounds familiar. Well, I'm sorry, let me not say that. I hope it doesn't sound familiar. I really do hope that does not sound familiar, but that is a reality in a lot of our organizations, and it's incredibly frustrating. It's frustrating for the operations group. It's frustrating for the maintenance group. It's certainly frustrating for the plant manager or whoever is in charge. A lot of times the technicians don't mind it because they get paid 4 hours of overtime just to show up. So, exponentially, it's more expensive by not having the right parts in stock. This slide right here, this is based on 20 years of doing this thing that I do now, and in the 20 years I spent in private industry. But, a lot of this is based on, the assessments that I do at organizations. 58% of a typical storeroom, the inventory has not been issued in over 3 years. Now, I know what a lot of you are saying, okay? I am not suggesting that 58% of your inventory is obsolete. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is almost 60% of your inventory has not been issued in over 3 years. Now we can categorize that inventory. Okay, we can put some of that inventory in nice little buckets. Some of that is critical spares. Some of that is maybe the supplier is no longer business. Maybe the supplier is no longer manufacturing that spare part. Some of that is going to be obsolete. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of reasons why we haven't touched that inventory, but the fact remains that 58% of a typical storeroom, we have not issued materials in over 3 years. Of the remaining 42% of what I call active inventory, and that my definition of active inventory is at least one inventory turn a year. Okay, so 42% of the active inventory, 60% of that is overstocked. Okay, so when organizations bring me in to do an assessment, one of the reasons that they bring me in is they want a third party to make a recommendation on how much more storeroom space they need. I can tell you, I have never recommended adding more warehouse space. Never. I've never recommended that. What I do recommend, though, is making sure that you have the right materials to the right stocking levels. Because here's the issue. If I come in and I recommend that you add another, I don't know, throw a number out, 20,000 square feet, 50,000 square feet, 100,000 square feet, human nature is all you're going to do is just fill it up with more stuff. And 3, 4, 5 years from now, you're going to call me back and do another assessment. You're going to ask me again, how much more space do we need? And I'm going to say the same thing. I think you have way too much space. The challenge is, and I'm going to show you this later on, my definition of a MRO storeroom is risk mitigation. That's my definition. That's the sole reason why we have a storeroom operation is, do we have the right parts at the right time? It's mitigating the risk of downtime. The third bullet there, 7 to 12% of the stocked or the stock keeping units, SKUs, are duplicates. It's the same part number. I'm sorry, it's the same part, but whenever we set it up as a new item in the warehouse, we create a new part number. Same part, different part number. So on average, between 7 and 12%. Inventory accuracy across the globe is somewhere between 75 and 90%. There's been a couple organizations I worked with where they have a pretty robust cycle count program, and their inventory accuracy is pretty high. It's pretty close to world class. World class being 98% inventory accuracy. But if you think about it, 75 to 90%, that's pretty low. Average obsolete inventory accounts for 8 to 20% of inventory value. World class is less than 5%. So I've never heard a maintenance manager ever say to me, yeah, sure, go ahead, throw it away. Quite the opposite, actually. They want to hold on to it because we can rebuild it, we can refurbish it, we can take parts off of it. We can do a whole lot of other things, right? But for goodness sakes, don't throw it away, okay? And by the way, if we do throw it away, shortly after 5 p.m. at the end of our shift, we have a bunch of dumpster divers out back, pulling that material back out of the dumpster and stashing it somewhere. I'll talk about stashing in a second. Average inventory turns are less than 1%. It wasn't too long ago that I worked with a group. We calculated the inventory turns, and the inventory turns were 0.07. 0.07. That tells me one of two things. Either you have way too much inventory or you have way too much obsolete materials. Okay, and it turns out there's a combination of both. They have way too much materials and then a way too much obsolete materials. So less than 1%. One of the things that I also do look at when I come in is how much are you spending on expedited freight, overnight materials in, next day materials, 2-day delivery, whatever the case may be. I've never really calculated the average annual cost of expedited freight. Okay, I've never done that, but I know organizations spend a lot of money on expedited freight. Look, there's a reason why you get a big, huge fruit basket from FedEx at the end of the year, Christmas time. All right, you paid for it, whether you know it or not. You paid for that big gift at the end of the year. Okay, by excessively using expedited freight. If you take this slide as a whole, you need to look at how does that impact this thing called carrying cost. Now, there's a general rule of thumb out there that says, look, carrying cost is 25% of the purchase price. I'm not exactly sure who came up with that number. That's the general rule of thumb. It's 25%. Carrying cost being, salaries, the cost to operate the storeroom, heating, the cooling, the insurance, cost of money. There's a whole bunch of things that get cobbled together to come up with this thing called carrying cost. So in theory, you pay for that part, every 4 years. So if you go back to that very first bullet, where 58% of your inventory has not been issued in over 3 years, that can get pretty expensive. Now, if we run some of the numbers based on this, now these are averages. Now, based on these averages, if we run some numbers here, okay, let's assume, all right, we have a $1 million inventory value. So based on some of those previous numbers that I put up there, that would translate into almost $580,000 in materials that hasn't been issued, based on the 60% excess inventories of those things that we are. I mean, what's the easiest thing that we can do with our min-max levels? If we run out of a component or we run out of a spare part, what's the easiest thing that we can do with our min-max levels? And that is to jack the min levels up. I see it time and time again. We ran out of a part. We're not going to run out of the part again. So double the min level. All right. We're not going to run out of these parts again. So potentially we have $250,000 of excess inventory. If I take a look at the duplicate part numbers, same part, different part numbers, I mean, that could almost be $70,000 based on the 75 to 90% average inventory accuracy. That could potentially mean that we have an 80% chance that we're going to have the right part, when it's required. So what does that translate into then on cash flow? Let me go back. Let me just take a step back here. When I reference the min-max levels, there are some organizations that have established min-max levels. That's great. Okay, that's great. Because in theory, when we hit the min level, that's our reorder point. And the min levels are calculated by consumption rate and lead time. That's how we determine our min levels. Some organizations put an extra layer of just in case inventory. They call it safety stock. I will never recommend anybody safety stock. I don't believe in safety stock. As long as my min-max levels are correct and reviewed consistently, there's no need for me to add yet another layer of inventory. So how about secret stashes or squirrel nest? Some refer to it as. There's not an organization in the world that I go into where we haven't have secret stashes of materials around the facility. Now, I've been 2 kilometers down into the earth, down in mines, and I've seen secret stashes of material down there. I've been on oil rigs. There's secret stashes there. I've been in all types of facilities where, we have materials stashed somewhere around the facility. So I have a little bit of a personal thing as far as finding, secret stashes around my own house. And I think Joanne is going to play us a video here. And I'm going to show you some of the secret stashes that I have.
Okay. Day 8, I think, so far. All right. So in solitary confinement. So I'm sitting here trying to keep myself entertained, trying to do some work, and I find myself playing shells. Well, you can only play the shell game for so long because I keep winning. But then I started thinking, of all the years I've been doing this, There's not a facility that I go into that doesn't have secret stashes or hidden materials around the facility. So it started making me think, what about my wife? Does she have secret stashes of material? Secret stashes that I don't know about? Guess what? I found them. Check this out. My wife thinks she's so smart. So one of the other things that I'm doing during this downtime is cleaning. So I moved the couch to vacuum. And guess what I found? A secret stash. Whoa. So maybe, I wonder, are there other secret stashes around the house? So I start walking around, checking things out, right? Now, here's the front door. Here's her purses. Let's look inside her purses. My, what do we find here? Ho, ho, ho. And what do we find in this one? Kit Kats, by the way, my favorite. And this one, Godiva chocolates. So, let's keep looking. Are there any other secret stashes that we have around the house that I don't know about? Materials that we could be using? Let's look. Good thing I don't cook, because that's our other secret stash. How about the microwave? Oh, dang, that's my secret stash. I like Tabasco. All right, how about some other areas? How about the bedroom? Good place, I think. The bed? Mike and Ike's. Interesting. How about the nightstand? Mike and Ike's. Imagine that. Huh. What else can we find of our secret stashes around the house? Let's look outside. Let's look outside. All right, we're outside. How about the grill? Oh, geez, more Tabasco. All right, never mind. That's my secret stash. We won't do that. My point here is, there's not a facility in the world that doesn't have secret stashes of material. The reason why is because we've lost confidence in the storeroom to have the right parts at the right time. Okay? Or convenience. We put the materials closest to the job site, rather than maybe kitting the materials for the next job, right? So again, best practices. Make sure that the inventory that's in your CMMS system is accurate. Because if it's not, we're going to lose confidence, all right? Now, we need to make sure that it's accurate. And if you're doing kitting or staging of the materials, right, we don't have to do this. Those secret stashes of material are assets. We have to understand that. Okay? So, high level of inventory accuracy. We must trust what's in the system that's actually going to be in the storeroom. All right? And we can eliminate these secret stashes. All right? Stay safe. Stay healthy.
All right, great. Thank you for doing that, Joanne. I appreciate that. Obviously that's a silly little video right there, emphasizing the fact that we have secret stashes. Side note there, I only had to sleep in the other bedroom for just a couple weeks after that video showed, but all's good now. I haven't found any more secret stashes. So this is how much is too much. This goes back, this slide right here, this goes back to what I was talking about, 60% of excess inventories. This, again, I'm picking on my wife. Luckily, she's now within earshot of me right here. Here's a picture of my wife's shampoo inventory, okay? She's obviously hasn't established proper min-max levels, and I do fully support min-max levels, as I just talked about, okay, based on the lead times, which we need to be reviewing constantly. That's our procurement or our purchasing department's responsibility, is they need to continually update lead times, because again, around the world, what I'm seeing is lead times are getting really squirrely right now. Just because we got an item within a week does not necessarily mean we're going to get it within a week the next time we order it. So one of their responsibilities is constantly updating lead times. Okay, and that's going to be, and again, our min levels are determined by our consumption rates. Okay, so and again, I've already mentioned this. I don't support adding another level of inventory called safety stock. I just don't. That's tying up cash. That's impacting our cash flow. That we could be using that for other things. So again, after conducting dozens and dozens of storeroom assessments, less than 5% of organizations have actually tapped into their safety stock. So again, just another reason why I don't support adding safety stock is because rarely do we tap into that. Look, if we are tapping, here's the translation. If we're tapping into our safety stock, that leads me to believe that our min-max levels are not established correctly. Okay. And by the way, that shampoo, that little bottle on the right-hand side, that's my year supply of shampoo right there. So ratio-wise, my wife is significantly over mine. So anyways, how much is too much? That's the point of this picture right here, is how much is too much. Okay. All right. So I've explained, or I've talked a little bit about, by us carrying extra inventory, how's that impact our cash flow? How does that impact our carrying cost, or add significantly to our carrying cost? By not having the right parts stocked correctly, what does that do to our expedited freight charges? All right, so all these are adding cost, onto our storeroom. And again, I don't honestly believe that a lot of organizations are really paying close attention to this. As I started out, they're considering this, a cost center, not a profit center. Now, if I have the right parts in the storeroom when they're required, you're going to have a hard time convincing me that that does not impact this thing called mean time to repair, which means the shorter MTTR is, the sooner the equipment gets back up and running, and the sooner that we start making money again. So that's why I refer to it as a profit center. Now, how do we get our arms wrapped around this elephant? Okay, as the saying goes, one bite at a time. So these are a couple of hints and tips for you that I do when I was, when I had, a couple dozen storerooms or warehouses actually that reported to me when I was a plant manager in my storeroom. These are some of the things that I implemented in my storerooms. First thing is, we need to get our arms wrapped around all the inventory in the facility. Understanding the secret stashes, grabbing all those parts, getting them back under control, putting them back in the storeroom, or whatever the case may be. But we need to get our arms wrapped around what do we have. That's step one. The next step then is what really is obsolete. And here's the thing that and I'm going to talk about, well, it's the next bullet, but this is, the cycle counts. This is one of the things that I never understood. If we have all this obsolete materials in the CMMS system and we are doing cycle counts, all we're doing is counting junk over and over and over again. Junk takes up space. Okay, that's why, again, organizations bring me in to recommend how much more space they need. So we need to really understand what truly is obsolete materials, segregate it, and then we need to disposition that material. Okay, because we don't want to if it's on the books, we can't just willy-nilly throw it away. We need to work with our friends in finance, perhaps set up a budget for that, and then bleed that obsolete materials down. The next thing that we want to do is we want to establish our ABC classifications. Okay, and all that is how we slice and dice our inventories up. Now you can use ABC a number of different ways. Okay, but typically A's account for 15% of our SKUs, B's account for 35%, C's account for 50%. Now, you can use ABC to set up your storeroom where A items are high moving, so we want to put those towards the window, and then B's are the next moving items, and then C's are the slow moving. ABC can set up based on value. A's can be critical spares. A can be very expensive. B's are the next level down. C's typically are the high volume, low dollar value, the nuts and bolts, things like that. Okay, so 50% of that inventory are classified as C. So let's establish ABC classifications, because that's going to lead into the next bullet, which is our daily cycle counts. I told all of my staffs over the years, there's only 3 certainties in life: death, taxes, and cycle counts. We will do daily cycle counts. And there was 2 things that I did with my daily cycle counts. One, I want you, by the way, my definition of a cycle count is a quality audit. That's my definition of a cycle count. It's a quality audit. Are we doing the debits and are we doing the credits? Okay. Cycle counts are established by the CMMS should randomly generate the cycle counts using ABCs. So that's where we physically go out to the bin or the shelf or the location, and we count how many parts are in that location. Okay, so that's my actual versus system counts. The other thing that I had my group do was what I call location verification. So CMMS systems, SAP, Maximo, Infor, Oracle, whatever upkeeps. The system is only as smart as the data that we're putting into it. So where I'm going with this is sometimes what we do is when we're putting parts away, we're supposed to put it in location C12, and instead of turning to the left and putting it in C12, we turned right and we put it into D12. Okay, it's the wrong location. So what I wound up doing was I had my group go out there and just do location verification. I don't care the counts at this point. Just go out there and verify for me what is actually in that bin, what is in that shelf, what is in that bulk racking, okay, what is, in the offsite storage locations, things like that. Right? And we match that up to what the CMMS system says that we have in that location. So 2-prong: actual counts, location verification. I also had 3 KPIs that I used: inventory accuracy, net dollar accuracy, and gross dollar accuracy. So let me explain those 3. Inventory accuracy is exactly what it says: actual counts versus system count. Okay, the system says I have 100 widgets in this bin. I have 98 widgets in that bin. So my inventory accuracy for that is 98%. Net dollar accuracy, and I think most of you are familiar with this. At the end of every month, accounting does their roll-ups, right, or end of month closeout, and they do this thing called reconciliations. And so that's where they're taking all the adjustments that we do in our inventory. If we go to the bin, we find out that, look, there's only 98 parts, in that location. We need to write off 2 of those. All right, that's the adjustment that accounting needs to make. Okay. Net dollar accuracy is calculated by the total dollar value or total value of what we counted, divided by the actual dollar value of what we counted. Okay, so there's the system value, then there's the actual count value. All right, and in the net dollar accuracy takes the pluses and minuses. Okay, gross dollar accuracy those familiar with absolute value, we add all of our adjustments up. Whether it's a negative or positive pickup, we add everything up, right? And then we divide that into the total dollars or total value that we counted. Net dollar accuracy measures, I could put a dollar value. Here's an example. I'm sorry, let me just go into this. Here's the example right here. So this was a cycle count that we did. If you see the classifications is a mixture between ABCs, the unit cost, the system count, the actual cycle count, the extended cost, then there's the net dollar accuracy and the gross dollar accuracy. So if you jump to the bottom there, of the 25 counts, 18 of them were accurate. So our inventory accuracy was 72%, which is pretty bad. Net dollar accuracy, as I said, it takes into account all the positives and negatives, all right? And we do the math. In this example, we were off by 4.7%. We shrunk the inventory by 4.7%. So our net dollar accuracy was 95.3%. Okay, that's the value of our inventory accuracy. Gross dollar adds everything up, positives and the negatives. And in this example, we were off 6.2%, which translated into 93.8%. All right, that gross dollar accuracy, that measures how well your processes are working. All right, there's only two reasons why your inventory is off. Either the process failed, or 99% of the time, 99.9% of the time, someone failed to follow the procedure. So remember that example I said when we put this part into, it's supposed to go into C12, we put it in D12. Financially, we didn't lose or gain anything. We just put it in the wrong location. So there was a process failure. I can measure that, and I can put a value on that. So again, the three KPIs I used: inventory accuracy, net dollar accuracy, gross dollar accuracy. On the bottom there, you can see what world-class levels are. 98% inventory accuracy, 98% net dollar accuracy, 95% gross dollar accuracy. Continuing on with how do we gain control? Look, I mentioned this earlier. I've been audited more times than I like to think, all right? And I know that when the auditors come in, one of the things that they do is they take a look at the top 25 most expensive items in your inventory, and they go randomly go look for them to confirm that they're in inventory. Because if those high ticket items are off, financially, that's going to have the biggest impact. Quite honestly, they could care less how many screws and how many bolts you have. Okay, so this is what I do. I have a top 25 most expensive items. Now, either that's an individual unit cost or extended cost. Okay, but I want the top 25 most expensive items in your inventory. These are the things I look for when I go out. Okay, one, can the item be found? You'd be amazed. Okay, how many times we cannot find the item? Is the item in the right location? We find it, but it may be in the wrong location. What condition is that material in? All right, have there been components removed? Real life example, there was a 750 horsepower motor that we went on a scavenger hunt. The motor was in the right location, but somebody had taken off the brake assembly off that motor. So therefore, that item is no longer in working condition. So, has there been anything taken out of it? All right, and is the part stored correctly? Is it out of the elements? Is it covered? Are the shafts greased up, right? Are the keys with the motors, all these different things, how are we managing that asset? Next bullet, all items are issued to a work order, all of them, okay? No exception. Set up the storeroom to be both efficient and effective. I already talked about that. A's being closest to the window or the point of issuing, and then we cascade that out. So let's set it up to be both efficient and effective. There is no such thing as the honor system. Okay. Too many organizations I go into, Technicians go into the storeroom, they grab a handful of different huge advocate for those. Love them. Love the concept of the vending machines. Get those out into the field, get them to the point of use, get those high moving items out there. So, the technicians, the maintenance group doesn't have to walk across the campus to go get duct tape, all right, or WD-40 or Loctite or whatever the case may be, a pair of safety glasses. Because human nature is they're not going to walk from point A to point B. They're going to walk from point A to B to C to D to F to get to the storeroom. Okay. Keep in mind that 24 to 26% of a typical technician's day is walking to and from the job site. All right, carrying on right here, how to gain control, get the min-max levels correct, review them regularly, identify overstocked items and bleed that inventory back down. All right, turn the faucets off from procurement. Stop buying this stuff. We need to get this inventory back down within our min-max levels. Quickly identify items that are understocked. I'm going to show you on the next slide, I believe, a silver bullet, because I can tell you within 95% accuracy of what you should have in your storeroom and what your min-max level should be. So identify those understocked items and buy them. That's what you tell your procurement team to go do. Go out and buy these things. Get them in inventory. I do like vendor managed inventory. I do like as consignment programs. I do like having benchmarks against best practices. Okay, continuous improvement. All right, that's what that's referred to as. This is years ago, I developed a bunch of different spreadsheets. All right, and I was sharing some of these spreadsheets with a person at one of my client site, and they said, "Hey, this is all good stuff. Too many spreadsheets. Can you just put it into one spreadsheet?" And I did. Now, there is no magic about this spreadsheet. Okay, all CMMS systems should be capable of doing this. Okay, but this is the part number. I want to run a couple different reports. The number of times the part was issued, the total quantity that was issued. Okay, there's a difference. How many times did somebody come up to the window and request this item? And over the course of 13 months, how many times did we issue that part out? Not quantity, how many times did we issue it out? I purposely said 13 months because I want some overlap. All right, there may be some anomalies that we experienced. Maybe we had a shutdown turnaround, whatever the case may be, but I want to average the usage out over 13 months. So that's what those columns are. Okay. If I understand what the usage rate is, all right, monthly and weekly, I can determine my min-max levels, unit cost, my average inventory value, classifications. I can put an algorithm in there to automatically classify A, B, or C's. What's my quantity on hand? Based on my new min-max levels, what am I overstocked on? More importantly, what am I understocked on? All right. What's the excess value in our inventories and what are we undervalued in our inventory? So if you look at this spreadsheet, as you can imagine how many SKUs you have in your storeroom, this is a pretty good size spreadsheet. Okay, but on average, that center column there, average inventory, that's the average between your min-max and the unit cost. So I can come up pretty much with what your inventory value should be. Now, I'm going to hold you accountable for that value. How you manage that. That's the tactical value of your storeroom. That's the value of inventory that we need for risk mitigation. Anything above that, we're tying up cash flow. Anything below that, we're exponentially increasing the risk to the organization. Now, on the excess value, we need to figure out what are we going to do with that extra inventory. On the undervalued or the understocked, That's the items that we're going to tell procurement to go out and buy. All right. Wrapping it up here a little bit, the importance of planning and scheduling here. I had a plaque in my office at one time called the 5 Ps of planning. All right. It was proper planning prevents potential problems, which is true, which is absolutely true. Maintenance planners should be working at least 2 weeks ahead of everybody else. So today is week 0. Next week, we should be pretty much done with next week's schedule. We'll have our scheduling meeting later in the week, Thursday, preferably, okay, typically, to lock next week's schedule in. So my planners should be working out sometime in the future. I had my planners always looking at a 90-day horizon, okay? What's coming down the pipeline? What are the PMs that are scheduled? Okay, nothing frustrates operations more when their equipment goes down, maintenance comes in, does the repair job. 2 days later, they come in, request the equipment back to do their monthly PM on it. That's why I want my planners looking ahead. While we have the equipment, is there any other work that we can pull in and execute that job while we have the equipment? If we have a locked in frozen schedule for next week, we should be able to implement kitting and staging of materials for those jobs requiring materials. There should be a process in place for orders that did not get done this week, because that's the reality. There's a lot of jobs that are scheduled but didn't get done. What are we going to do with those kits? Are we going to reschedule those jobs? Okay, so the kits will stay there. Or we did something else to do the repair job and these kits are no longer required. So what's the process now to return those items back into our inventory? Nothing gets on the frozen schedule unless we physically can put our hands on those items. That's from personal experience. That's how I started today's session out. And then maintenance is a recurring activity. Okay. Now, we don't know what the frequency of that possibly is. This is corrective maintenance. PMs we already know, but corrective maintenance, we don't know what that recurring activity timeline is going to be. It could be, again, it could be tomorrow, it could be next week, it could be next month, it could be in the year 2025, 2030. But we are pretty much assured that we will execute that same job again. So how many times do the maintenance planners need to develop detailed sequential job plans? One time. So that's why I wanted my planners. I wanted them to create a quality job plan and load it up into our CMMS. It will be there for eternity. All right, so to summarize, the only way to achieve world-class storeroom operations is to control the inventory, period. We have to understand, get our arms wrapped around what do we have. We need to control it, establish, the min-max, all the things that I've talked about, getting things under control. Organizations will never fully realize optimization until they buy into that the storeroom can be a profit center. Planning and scheduling has an enormous impact on the what, the how, and the why we have a risk mitigation warehouse. And finally, communication is key to our success. 100%. Communication is key to our success. All right, so that should wrap it up. That actually takes us to perfect timing, actually. That worked out well.
Thank you, Andy. Yeah, we'll leave some time for some questions. I believe we did get one earlier on in the webinar. Neil asked, what about the minimum reordering quantity? Is this considered an inventory breaker?
I'm not sure. I'm sorry, Joanne. I'm not sure if I understand the question. Is the min level an inventory breaker?
Yeah, it says this is an inventory breaker. I'm not exactly too sure either. So Neil, if you can rephrase your question perhaps, but he mentions, the minimum reordering quantity. Maybe perhaps how does this affect inventory?
Yeah. So again, the min level should automatically trigger a purchase requisition. And that purchase requisition is going to be to replenish the inventory to the max level. Now, keep in mind, when you're determining max levels, some of the items that you buy come in sets, whether that's a set of 2 or half a dozen or a dozen or whatever the case may be. That'll dictate what your max level is. But the reorder point is when you hit the min level. Now, of course, as I said a couple times now, the min level is based on lead time and the average consumption rate. That's how you determine your min max level. That's how you determine your min level. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. And then we just got one more question here from Rupesh. What will be the proportion between stock items and class 4 items, non-stock?
Oh, well, I mean, that's a hard one to answer, because when you talk about non-stock, those tend to be referred to as your one-offs. So I don't believe I've ever seen a ratio of what percentage should be non-stock, because again, the definition of non-stock is it's a one-off. It's bought one time or very, very rarely. So that's the definition of non-stock item. But again, to answer your question, I'm not aware of any ratio that says X percentage of your inventory should be non-stock. Yeah. I'm not exactly sure why we would be calculating a ratio of non-stock items.
Got it. So it seems like that's the end of our questions here. Actually, we got a few more. V Reddick says, what is the best practice to determine the minimum reorder point, the minimum reorder quantity in combination with procurement lead time? Is there any formula?
Well, again, it's your average consumption rate. Okay. So how many or what quantity are we averaging, weekly or monthly? And this is going to be based on what is the lead time from your supplier. So, if our lead time from our supplier is, 2 weeks, and our average consumption rate, is 10, then you're probably going to want to set your min levels at, throw a number out, 15, 10, 15, somewhere in there. But again, it's your average lead time. It's your lead time and your average consumption rate is going to determine your min levels. Okay.
Cool. I think we have another question coming in. I'll give them a few moments to kind of complete their statement before we move forward. Another question was, do you recommend the term insurance spares?
That's a good question. Okay. So what I'm thinking you mean by insurance spares, you're also referring to that as critical spares. My definition of critical spares is life insurance policy. Okay. I don't want to use my life insurance policy. Okay. Because if I'm using my life insurance policy, that means my wife is using my life insurance policy and I'm not around anymore. So I don't want to use my life insurance policy, nor do I want to use my insurance spares and my critical spares. But it's the consequence of failure. All right. That's going to determine your critical spares. What is your risk tolerance? Is the risk too great that to an organization that I am absolutely going to have this spare part readily available, or I can get this readily available within a supplier within a couple hours? Okay. That's my definition of a critical spare or insurance spare. Okay. It's what is your risk tolerance? Okay. And what is the consequence of the failure by us not stocking that item? Okay.
Cool. And one more question from Rupesh. He says, we need to keep much of the inventory of the imported items in India, and that's why inventory rises. So is there any solution for balancing or optimizing this?
No, because there is no one size that fits all. So that's a good question. Supply chain around the world is getting, as I said, it's getting really squirrely. It's getting pretty dicey. I mean, it's virtually every day, we're hearing, supply chain issues around the world. So I understand why we need to carry some excess inventories. Now, is there a right answer to that? No, I don't think so. It's because of the supply chain issues that we're currently experiencing. I get it. I understand why we need to carry some excess inventory. But again, my definition of a storeroom is risk mitigation. If your supply chain is unreliable, then I would expect that your inventories would be generally inflated more so than they normally would be.
Cool. And another statement from Neil earlier with his question from minimum reordering quantity. He says, the vendor sometimes dictates the minimum reordering quantity that we can order against certain spare parts, which in turn we need to comply with the vendor dictated quantity that exceeds our max setting of inventory.
Yeah. All right. Well, so again, I was the director of global sourcing for a Fortune 500 company, and I can tell you that sometimes your customer needs to understand who their customer is. I'm sorry, your supplier needs to understand who the customer is. So that can come back to negotiations. That could come back to supplier agreements. That could potentially go back to consignment issues. Now, remember, the only difference between VMI and consignment, the only difference between vendor managed inventory and consignment is who owns it. VMI, you own it. Consignment, they own it. Now, if your supplier is dictating what the min levels are, or minimum reorder points, I should say that, then and there's no room for negotiations, then that's I guess that it is what it is.
Cool. And then one last question: who would determine stock levels?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So there's two trains of thought. One is the storeroom reports to procurement. There's another camp that says storeroom should report to maintenance. My personal belief, and it is considered a best practice, storerooms report to maintenance. Because remember, procurement, they're being driven by different KPIs. Procurement is being driven by minimize the inventory as low as you can go, and in some cases, buy the cheapest you can because their KPIs reduce cost. So when it comes down to who determines, what is the right, that's going to be based on historical data on your usages, what materials that you've used. Like that spreadsheet that I showed you, we have to have a high level of data integrity to help us determine what is the right inventory levels.
Thank you. All right, well, I think that's all of our questions. So that concludes our webinar. So thank you again, Andy, for spending your time hosting this webinar. I hope everyone learned something new today. And it was a pleasure having you with us. And again, Andy and I are in the community Slack group, so please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any further questions. And for anyone who did jump into the webinar in the middle, don't worry, the recording will be available for everyone in our Slack channel tomorrow. So yeah, thank you all again. I'll see you all in Slack, and Andy, have a great rest of your day as well.
Joanne, thank you very much for hosting, and everybody, thank you very much for taking the time of your day to join us.
All righty, have a great day, everyone.